All right, we're going to talk about something that's hiding in plain sight. It's a story about a piece of medical advice that did a complete 180, a total flip-flop. But before that happened, there was this quiet battle being waged by scientists behind the scenes. And this isn't just some dry science story. This is a public health triumph that has literally saved tens of thousands of babies' lives. And it all started with a really big mistake. So let's just dive right in. Imagine this. For 50 years, half a century, doctors, nurses, even your own parents and grandparents were giving out this one specific piece of advice to new parents. And they meant well. They absolutely did. But that advice, it turned out to be tragically, fatally wrong. So what was it?
Okay, get ready for this, because it's pretty shocking. For decades, the standard advice was to put babies to sleep on their stomachs. Yup, face down. And this whole recommendation was based on this one single fear that was never even properly tested, the fear that a baby might spit up and choke. As we now know, the science shows the exact opposite is true.
And listen, we're not talking about the dark ages here. As recently as 1992, a staggering 87% of infants in the US were still being put to sleep on their stomachs. That was the standard of care. That was the norm. It's wild to think about, right? So, how on earth did we turn that ship around? Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting. It's like a medical detective story. For decades, this idea of stomach sleeping was just the rule. It was dogma. But a few really observant scientists and epidemiologists around the world started noticing little clues, little red flags that something was terribly, terribly wrong. So just take a look at this timeline. The first real evidence connecting stomach sleeping to SIDS pops up in scientific journals way back in 1970. Then, 15 years later, a study in Hong Kong finds that SIDS is almost unheard of there, where babies traditionally slept on their backs. By 1991, you have the UK, Australia, and New Zealand all launching their own back-to-sleep campaigns. And yet, it took until 1992 for the American Academy of Pediatrics to finally change its official advice. That's a 22-year delay. 22 years. And that delay, wow, it had a devastating cost. A major review crunched the numbers and calculated that if the world had just acted on the evidence from the 1970s, at least 50,000 infant deaths could have been prevented. Think about that number. This wasn't just some academic debate in a journal somewhere. This was a matter of life and death on a massive scale. So the data was piling up, right? It was proving that stomach sleeping was dangerous. But the next absolutely crucial question was why? What was actually happening? Unlocking that mystery was the key to really changing minds and ultimately saving lives. Okay, so the leading theory we have today is something called the triple risk model, and it's a fascinating way to think about it. It basically says that a SIDS death isn't just this random out-of-the-blue event. It's more like a perfect storm, where three specific things have to line up. First, you have a baby with some kind of subtle underlying vulnerability that we might not even know about. Second, they're in that critical developmental window, usually between 2 and 4 months old. And third, they encounter an external stressor. And guess what the single biggest external stressor is that science has identified? Yep, sleeping on the stomach. So why exactly is it so dangerous? Well, it boils down to three main things. First up is something called rebreathing. When a baby is face down, they can basically trap a little pocket of their own exhaled air around their nose and mouth. They end up breathing in more carbon dioxide and less oxygen. Not good. Second is what's called impaired arousal. Now, babies actually sleep deeper on their stomachs, which might sound like a good thing, but it's not. It actually makes it harder for their natural alarm bells to go off and wake them up if something's wrong with their breathing. And third, overheating. Babies get rid of a lot of heat from their face, and being face down can block this, causing their body temperature to climb to dangerous levels. And this right here? This is the slide that just blows that whole original choking myth right out of the water. It's simple anatomy. When a baby is on their back, their windpipe, that's their airway, sits on top of their esophagus, their food pipe. So gravity is on their side. Any spit up just stays down. But look what happens when they're on their stomach. Now that fluid can pool right at the opening of their airway. So stomach sleeping actually made choking more likely, not less. The exact opposite of what everyone feared. Okay, so the science was settled. Case closed. But now came this immense challenge. How do you change a habit that nearly 90% of the country is doing? This is what led to one of the most successful public health campaigns in modern history.
So in 1994, the Back to Sleep campaign officially launched. And its genius, really, it was in its simplicity. The message was crystal clear, direct, and something every parent could do immediately. And they put it everywhere. I mean, you saw it in doctors' offices, on TV. They even partnered with huge brands like Pampers and Gerber to put the message right into the hands of new parents. It was brilliant. And the results? They were immediate, and they were absolutely astonishing. Check this out. In 1992, before the campaign really kicked off, the SIDS rate was over 120 per 100,000 births. Now look at that drop by 1999. Just a few years later, the rate had been slashed by nearly half. I mean, you can see it right there. The campaign was working. Big time. To put it simply, the campaign cut the SIDS rate by more than 50%. That is just an incredible public health achievement. And it wasn't just a statistic. It translated into thousands of babies' lives being saved. Every single year. But, the work wasn't done. As the SIDS rates plummeted, researchers noticed something else in the data. Other sleep-related deaths, things like accidental suffocation, they weren't declining nearly as fast. So this insight, driven by the data, led the campaign to evolve. In 2012, it was rebranded as Safe to Sleep, and the focus expanded from just the baby's position to the entire sleep environment. So that brings us right up to today. What does the gold standard for safe sleep look like now? And were there any unintended consequences from this massive nationwide shift? And yeah, there was one pretty major side effect, a huge increase in what's called flat head syndrome, or plagiocephaly. With all these babies spending so much more time on their backs, their soft little skulls could sometimes get a bit flat in one spot. And the rates in infancy really shot up to almost 50%. But, and this is the important part, the data shows it's almost always a temporary cosmetic thing. Look at the numbers. By the time kids are teenagers, the rate drops all the way down to about 1%. For most kids, it just corrects itself over time. And that leads us to today's complete safe sleep checklist. Back to sleep for every single sleep until age 1 is still rule number 1, absolutely. But it's now paired with a few other critical things. You need to use a firm, flat, and totally bare sleep surface. That means no blankets, no pillows, no bumpers, none of that stuff. Room sharing is actually recommended, but, and this is a big but, not bed sharing. Offering a pacifier at sleep time can also help. And of course, avoiding overheating and any smoke exposure. And finally, to help with development and prevent that flat head syndrome we just talked about, give your baby plenty of supervised tummy time when they're awake. But we have to be clear, the mission is not over, far from it. While the overall rates have dropped dramatically, there are still these profound, heartbreaking disparities. Today, African American and American Indian/Alaska Native infants still die from sleep-related causes at more than twice the rate of white infants. Closing this equity gap, that is the biggest and most urgent challenge we face in this area today. And this all leads to a really critical question for the future. You see, progress in reducing these deaths has pretty much stalled. On top of that, in 2024, the federal leadership for the Safe to Sleep campaign, the group that spearheaded this for 3 decades, is ending. So the big question we're left with is, who is going to carry the torch now? Who's going to protect the next generation of babies?